Dracula, the king of vampires, the creature that launched 1,000 horror stories and probably single-handedly kept garlic farmers employed for centuries. But what if the Null Horizon Authority had to deal with him? Today we're looking at how the NHA would classify, capture, contain, and scientifically study one of the most infamous entities in human folklore. Within the NHA database, an entity matching Dracula's profile would almost certainly be labeled a fracture-class xenobiological entity. Fracture-class anomalies are things that partially obey known biology but violate the limits of it. Dracula checks several boxes immediately: extreme regeneration, biological immortality, blood-based metabolism, hypnotic influence over humans, and environmental weaknesses like sunlight. Those traits suggest something very specific: an organism whose cellular processes operate outside baseline human metabolism. In other words, Dracula wouldn't be magic, he'd be xenobiology. Capturing something like Dracula would not involve angry villagers and wooden stakes. The NHA would approach this like a surgical operation. First step, environmental control. Field agents would deploy ultraviolet floodlights across the operational zone. Even if sunlight doesn't instantly destroy him, intense UV radiation appears to weaken the entity significantly in most accounts. Second step, mobility denial. High-velocity tungsten nets combined with electromagnetic restraints would restrict movement. A creature with enhanced strength needs layered restraint systems. Third step, metabolic suppression. Rather than trying to kill Dracula outright, NHA medtech teams would use a synthetic anticoagulant aerosol designed to destabilize the blood-dependent metabolic cycle. Essentially, you deprive the vampire of the biological fuel he depends on. Once immobilized, the entity would be transported inside a sealed containment casket built from reinforced silver titanium alloy. At an NHA site, Dracula would be stored inside a Type 4 biological containment vault. Picture a cylindrical chamber surrounded by multiple environmental controls. First, UV saturation lighting. The chamber would remain permanently flooded with ultraviolet radiation to keep the entity in a weakened state. Second, atmospheric filtration. The air would contain trace compounds derived from garlic's sulfur molecules. While folklore exaggerates its power, these compounds may disrupt certain parasitic organisms. The NHA would treat it as a biochemical irritant. Third, nutritional control. Dracula would not be given human blood. Instead, NHA researchers would synthesize a controlled hemoglobin solution designed to sustain the entity without strengthening it. Think of it as putting the vampire on a medically supervised diet. The NHA wouldn't just lock Dracula away and forget about him. A creature like this would be one of the most important biological discoveries in human history. Researchers would investigate three major questions. First, what causes the regeneration? If Dracula's cells can rebuild tissue rapidly, understanding that mechanism could revolutionize medicine. Second, how does the entity influence human minds? The hypnotic effect associated with vampires may involve pheromones, neurological signals, or even unknown electromagnetic activity. And third, why sunlight works as a weakness. If ultraviolet radiation disrupts Dracula's cellular structure, that could reveal how the anomaly maintains its abnormal physiology. Despite the research potential, Dracula would remain extremely dangerous. Long-term containment would require constant monitoring, because entities with centuries of intelligence tend to become very good at manipulation. If the creature ever breached containment, the NHA would initiate a null-break containment protocol. That means immediate area quarantine, daylight deployment teams, and full neutralization authorization. So, while the legends describe Dracula as an unstoppable supernatural monster, the Null Horizon Authority would see something else entirely: a biological anomaly, dangerous, ancient, and incredibly valuable to study, because in the NHA worldview, even the most terrifying myth is just another mystery waiting to be dissected. And the moment something exists in reality, it becomes a containment problem,